पड़ा है। दुर्गम को पार करके हिमालय कोई चढ़ा है। लाई रंग मेहनत आखिर तुम्हारी दिन, लाई रंग मेहनत आखिर तुम्हारी दिन। होगा विशाल तरवर वो बीज जो पड़ा है, होगा विशाल तरवर वो बीज जो पड़ा है। ये मत कहो खुदा से मेरी मुश्किलें बड़ी हैं, ये मत कहो खुदा से मेरी मुश्किलें बड़ी हैं। ये मुश्किलों से कह दो मेरा खुदा बड़ा है, ये मुश्किलों से कह दो मेरा खुदा बड़ा है। वो सर्व शक्तियों से जब साथ है हमारे, वो सर्व शक्तियों से जब साथ है हमारे, हर काम उसके रहते हरदम हुआ पड़ा है, हर काम उसके रहते हरदम हुआ पड़ा है। कभी हार ना हिम्मत का कदम बढ़ाओ, कभी हार ना हिम्मत का कदम बढ़ाओ। हजारों कदम बढ़ाने वो सामने खड़ा है, हजारों कदम बढ़ाने वो सामने खड़ा है। ये मत कहो खुदा से मेरी मुश्किलें बड़ी हैं, ये मत कहो खुदा से मेरी मुश्किलें बड़ी हैं। ये मुश्किलों से कह दो मेरा खुदा बड़ा है, ये मुश्किलों से कह दो मेरा खुदा बड़ा है, ये मुश्किलों से कह दो मेरा खुदा बड़ा है।
Namaskar, my dear brothers and sisters, boys and girls. The love and blessings of the Mother and Sri Aurobindo to all of you from Sri Aurobindo Ashram Delhi branch. The devotional song that you heard just now in the melodious voice of Vitupal says that don't tell God that I have enormous problems. Don't tell God about the enormity of your problems. Instead, tell the problems that my God is far bigger than you. My God is far greater than you. You are nothing compared to my God. That's what you should tell your problems rather than telling God about the enormity of your problems, because for God, nothing is difficult, everything is a small thing. Ultimately, it is the divine, by whatever name we call him, Khuda or God or Ishwar or Paramatma. It is he who is the ultimate teacher, mentor, counselor and savior, who can rescue us from all problems, provided we hand over our problems to him, not as an experiment, but with total sincerity and in a spirit of total surrender. The other day, Monica told you about how to make asanas injury-proof. Today we shall widen the scope and see how we can make life event-proof and shock-proof. No matter what, how we can still be happy. Because if we choose not to be miserable, nothing can make us miserable. That is a freedom that nobody can take away from us. Even Hitler could not do that from the Jews. And that is what made Viktor Frankl, when he was in one of the concentration camps, and he underwent hard labor, he lost many members of his family, but when he decided not to be miserable, he succeeded in doing that. Not only he succeeded, he, being a person with a medical background, a psychiatrist, he came up with a form of therapy which now the world can use. And this therapy essentially is based upon how we can be happy, if not happy, at least keep misery away, no matter what the circumstances are, if we can look at the situation differently. With that little introduction, let's turn to the topic in greater detail using the PowerPoint. My pranams to the Mother and Sri Aurobindo. The S program is a part of the celebrations of the 150th birth anniversary of Sri Aurobindo and the 75th anniversary of India's independence. Stress management is a negative idea. So why just manage stress? It is negative. Stress management is negative in the sense it conveys the impression that stress in any case is inevitable. We should somehow make it a little more tolerable, a little bearable, a little less painful. But why just settle for that? Why not instead fill life with love, peace, joy, and fulfillment? That is what we have been concentrating on during the last few sessions. We saw what the spiritual worldview is, and based on that, what the true purpose of life is. And then we saw that while addressing the true purpose of life, inevitably we end up filling life with love, peace, joy, and fulfillment. And if we succeed in doing that, then where is the room for stress? And if there is no stress, what is it that we have to manage? So why not arrive at a state of mind where the word stress itself disappears from our life, we eradicate it, and instead fill life with just the opposite. However, the mind is by its nature turbulent, and therefore we find it difficult to be at peace. And for that we have to go beyond the mind, because something that is restless, something that is habitually volatile cannot be at peace. It needs an anchor. You know, the way a ship, if it is on the waves, it has to be anchored to the shore, and the mind also needs an anchor. The anchor itself should be steady, like that nail in the shore to which you tie the ship. So the anchor itself has to be stable, which is always at peace. And what is that part of the being? That part of the being is the soul. So the mind therefore has to be anchored to the soul for the mind to be at peace. And therefore, the key to filling life with love, peace, and joy is anchoring the mind to the soul so that the mind becomes one with that anchor. Or another way to put it would be that we achieve unification around unification of the being, particularly the mind, within the mind, particularly the vital or the emotional part of the mind, around the highest, the best, and the most powerful part of the being, and that is the soul. And that part is always at peace. It doesn't know anything like stress or anger or greed or hatred or any of those things which lead to the turbulence in the mind. It knows none of these. And when we unify ourselves around that part of the being, the entire being, the person is full of love, peace, and joy, which the soul is about. These are the characteristics of the soul, not desires and greed and hatred and so on. Now let's look at some of the common sources of joy in life and how the opposite of these can lead to stress. We spend quite a bit of our time during the day in some type of work, whether it is in the office or in business or at home, taking care of household work, doing the dishes or taking care of children. Now, all this is work. How can we find joy in work? Coming to sort of the what we normally understand by work, say at the workplace, it has been seen that the joy in work comes from primarily three things. One is we should be passionate about the work. We should really be very interested in doing that work. Secondly, we should be good at that. So excellence in the work, and that can come only if we are uniquely made for that type of work, or at least we are good at that work, and we have enough of talents, gifts, and training to be able to do that type of work properly. And if we have weaknesses, and all of us do have some weaknesses, the weaknesses do not matter, at least do not matter much in the type of work that we are doing. And thirdly, the work should be ethical. This is sometimes overlooked, but again, it's very important because, say, take the example of a pickpocket. He may be very passionate about what he wants to do because that's how he makes a living, and he may be very good at it. He's seldom caught doing what he's doing, picking anybody's pocket. But then somewhere deep within, he knows that it is not the right thing to do, and therefore he cannot have true joy in the work that he's doing. So what leads to stress at the workplace is the opposite of these: no joy in the work. Well, I mean, so long as the work is ethical, one may not be always passionate about the work the person is doing. Some of it may be just mechanical routine and drudgery, and that also is a part of almost any work that we do. So there may be no joy because of that, because it would be an exaggeration to say that one has a passion for all types of work. Nobody has that. But then how can we still find joy in that work? By realizing that if the work is there, it is our privilege to do it as an instrument of the divine. So when we turn to the divine and work in the spirit of karma yoga as an instrument of the divine, doing it well because it has to be offered to the divine and not be attached to the outcome of the work, if we are doing it in that spirit, then one can find joy in any type of work. So it's not always the work that determines whether you find the joy, because some of the work will not in itself be joyous, but at the same time, we can convert any type of work into a joyous experience if we do it in the spirit of karma yoga. Then interpersonal problems: the boss is not good, the colleagues are not good, and so on and so forth. Interpersonal problems. Once again, seeing the people as a manifestation of the divine, interpersonal problems can be solved. Instead of criticizing them, instead of trying to change them, try to see them as manifestations of the divine. Unethical choices, that is a difficult situation, and many people find that they have to go on doing that in spite of feeling uneasy because they see no other way. They switch jobs and they find that it's the same story being repeated. Either they have to make choices which are unethical themselves, or if somebody else has made them, they have to sign the dotted line. And the choice is between being hungry, not being able to take care of the family on one hand, and on the other hand, going on doing these unethical things. But then people who are really determined always manage to find a solution. Sometimes they are able to influence others and change the system, but more often than not, they decide to quit and do something on their own, or join a place like an NGO where they find that the atmosphere is far more ethical. I know of people who have accepted as much as a 75% salary cut to be able to work with an NGO rather than work in the corporate sector. I know people who have started doing something which is very different from the work for which they were trained, but they bring some of their managerial skills into a new ethical business which they start on their own, and so on. So there is always a way out. So much of the stress disappears when work becomes worship, and that it does when we do it in the spirit of karma yoga. When people are treated as a manifestation of the divine, and every event in life becomes an opportunity. Now, these are the three basic things that give us stress, and all three can be taken care of if life is lived in light of the spiritual worldview, if we understand life more meaningfully, if we are able to look at life at a level deeper than the surface with which we are all too familiar, and which we get conditioned to treating as the total reality. What we see on the surface is real, but all the same, it's only a part of the reality, and part of the truth can always be misguiding. So we have to see as much of the total truth as possible behind life and beyond life to be able to stay at peace. That is what anchoring to the soul is about, because the soul has that potential. It is the soul that makes us potentially divine, and that is what helps us see life in a different light. Now, living a life free of stress is not easy. I mean, all that we have talked so far, which makes us completely free of all stress and fills life with love, peace, and joy, is not easy. But then Sri Aurobindo has made a very perceptive remark in the Essays on the Gita that the stressful life that people live, that most people live, is even more difficult. That is not easy either. It is just that is more familiar. That is more commonplace. That is more in keeping with how everybody around us is living. And therefore, it is the fear of the unfamiliar that makes us feel that living that type of a life which will be full of love, peace, and joy, is very difficult. And the word that he uses is that we are afraid of that rarer atmosphere. Rarer means atmosphere with a lower pressure. At sea level we have a certain pressure. If you go to the mountain top, the atmospheric pressure goes down. Now, somebody who has always lived at sea level is afraid of going to the mountains, in spite of all their beauty, because he's so accustomed to breathing air at the normal sea level pressure that he's afraid of that rarer atmosphere in the hills. So it is that type of fear that makes us feel that stress-free life is very difficult. In fact, the stressful life that most people live is even more difficult than the stress-free life that is possible through love and through looking at life from the spiritual point of view. Now let's get out of the way a basic misconception that, the solution to stress is meditation. Now that is asking for too much from too little. Just sitting quietly for 20 minutes a day can't compensate for the tension and turmoil of 24 hours unless we change our attitude to the people around us and the events and circumstances of life. Let's take an example of, say, the people around us. There's a story of two women who were friends, close friends, and the children of one of them got married, one after another, a son and a daughter. They got married. So the other woman met her after some time and asked her, how's your daughter? Is she happy? Oh yes, she is very happy. She gets up whenever she likes in the morning. She has hardly any work to do at home. There are so many servants around. And she never cooks at home. They order food from outside. And her husband has placed at her disposal a driver and a car. She can go wherever she wants to. And if she has nothing else much to do, she goes out shopping, or to the beauty parlor. And quite often her husband is also able to accompany her, and she's very happy. And how about your daughter-in-law? Is she good? Oh, that's another story altogether. She gets up so late in the morning. She doesn't want to cook. She always gets food from outside. Now, the story is the same, but one is the daughter and the other is the daughter-in-law. She loves the daughter, she doesn't love the daughter-in-law. So the difference is love rather than the situation. However, to be fair to these elderly women, suppose there is a daughter-in-law and her own mother lives quite far away, and she gets the news that her mother is not well. She's a working woman. She applies for 2 weeks leave and goes away to take care of her mother. Then she comes back. After some time, her mother-in-law is not well, and she has to take leave for 2 days to take care of her. Oh, she keeps falling ill so often, and all my leave gets exhausted in just taking care of her mother-in-law. Now again, the situation is the same. One is the mother, for whom she happily takes 2 weeks leave, and the other is the mother-in-law, for whom she starts grumbling if she has to take leave for just 2 days from her work. So the difference is whom we love and whom we don't love. So the difference is love. Now here, the attitude to the situation is what is making all the difference. And the difference is rooted in love, and it is possible to love anybody provided we see the person as a manifestation of the divine, instead of look at that person in terms of the worldly relationship that we have with that person. That is what makes all the difference. Now, if we are not able to do that, if we are not able to make that shift, just sitting quietly in meditation for 20 minutes will not do much. I'm not saying meditation is of no use at all. In acute stress, it can help us feel a little more relaxed. It can also perhaps give us a deeper insight into our problems. It can also suggest solutions to the problems. It can put us in touch with that higher force for whom everything is easy. Nothing is beyond the possibility. In miraculous ways, the divine can solve our problems, and we can be in touch with that more easily when the surface has become quiet through meditation. All that is possible. But then, just to depend upon a technique, the way it is normally looked at, that if I sit like this, and if I breathe like this, and if I chant like this, then somehow miraculously everything will change, that is asking for too much from too little. Which means that there has to be a generalized change in the way we look at life. Meditation can be an opportunity for intensifying our resolve to live life in a particular way. And if that resolution during meditation has a spillover effect during the rest of the life, then yes, things will change. But to expect it purely from that technique, just because we sat down quietly for 20 minutes and breathed in a particular way and did some chanting or something, that will solve our problems. To expect that is asking for too much from too little. Now let's turn to an American psychologist, Richard Carlson. He's written this beautiful book, Don't Sweat the Small Stuff, and it's all small stuff. Now what he says in this book is essentially that all stress results from the gap between the way things are and the way we would like them to be. So stress may appear to be due to many other things, external factors, but that in fact is the root. Looked at on the surface, we think that the stress is because of certain people, certain events, or certain circumstances. That is what we feel. The stress is because of the boss, the stress is because the mother-in-law, the stress is because I don't have enough money, the stress is because of an illness, the stress is because of litigation. No, these are the types of reasons we give. Children, of course, have other ways, other reasons for being under stress. Children are also under tremendous stress, and apart from the rather too obvious when they are under pressure from their parents to do well in exams, apart from that, they have other types of stress also, being compared to the sibling, or in school being made fun of because they are not doing well in exam, or because they are from a different ethnic background, or because they are fat or clumsy or whatever. So they are being bullied by the friends, so-called friends in the class, for all types of reasons. So these are various things, which can make a child feel stressed. But so children's stress can be different, and that in fact makes increases the responsibility of the parents in many ways, apart from not comparing them with siblings, etc. One thing which is very important is for the children to understand that no matter what, here are two people, the father and the mother, who are always with me, and people whom I can always trust. people whom I can always share everything. And establishing that type of a communication, good communication in early childhood is very important, because that is the time when it can be also done easily. That is the time the child is forming a mental picture of the world around, and that is the time when the child can either start feeling that the world is a very ugly place in whom we can not trust anybody, or that the world is a beautiful place full of good people and he can trust this world. And that worldview, whether he can trust or he can't trust, is largely dependent upon whether he can trust the parents. And so the relationship of trust has to be established. The communication has to be free, so that when the child is a teenager and say passing through a difficult phase because of being bullied in the class, or because of being in a relationship and then having a breakup, that is the time when that communication, that trust that was built up in early childhood comes in handy. And while this teenager on one hand gives the impression that now I'm grown up and I don't need you anymore, the child once again turns into that little child and is ready to share everything. And that's where he finds the first support system, the most dependable support system. So the childhood stress should not be underestimated. Stress is not confined to adults. Stress can be children can be under great stress for various reasons, which to us may appear all small stuff. But to the child, it is not small stuff. And this is important because the number of children going into depression and even suicide among teenagers is on the rise. And therefore, it's important not to forget that children can also be under a great deal of stress due to reasons which are quite different from what the reasons for adults are. But all the same, that is important to the child. And if we reflect back on our own childhood, we will feel that yes, those were exactly the type of reasons why we were under stress. Either because we were being bullied in the class, or because our parents didn't allow us to wear the type of clothes that everybody else seems to be wearing. Any of these things can cause great stress in a child. Or people around us have something which we can't afford. Now, all these things can be a source of stress to the child. And what can help here is an unconditional love from the parents. That is of great value. Anyway, so coming back to the main thing, what is stress due to? Essentially, what Richard Carlson brings out is that all stress is due to the gap between the way things are, that is what really exists, and the way I would like them to be. Now, this in fact is a very simple way of looking at stress, but it applies to all types of stress, and therefore it is of great value to think, to look at stress this way. Suppose I want this much money and I have only this much money. There's a gap between the way things are and the way I would like them to be. Or I am sick, I am ill, I have an incurable illness and I want to be healthy. Again, there's a gap between what I want and what exists, and that's why I'm under stress. Or I want my husband or wife to behave in a certain way, but he or she insists on behaving in just the opposite way. Once again, there's a gap between what actually exists and what I would like. Now, theoretically, how can this gap be bridged? Let's look at this picture. At the center, you have that individual under stress because what exists is very different from what that person wants. Now, one possibility is that things change, the situation changes, so that now it is exactly as that person would like it to be. So the stress is gone. The second possibility is that the person changes. And now the person is quite happy with things as they are. So again, there is no gap. So the person has changed his way of looking at things. Nothing has changed, but because now he is looking at the situation differently, and therefore he is quite happy with the way things are. So once again, things are as he would like them to be, although nothing really has changed. So stress is gone. However, these two approaches are not mutually exclusive. To some extent, the situation could change, and to some extent, he could change. For example, I want this much money. I have only this much. I work hard and earn a little more. Now I have this much. It's not as much as I wanted, but it's more than what I had. Then I work at the other end. I reduce my desires. So when I reduce my desires, now the money that I have is quite enough to meet those desires, to fulfill those desires. So the result is stress is again gone. So one can work at both ends. So essentially we are working at two levels. One is trying to change the situation, if we can, and at the other end, trying to change ourselves so that we start liking things as they are. Now, out of these two options, changing the situation is generally difficult, especially when it comes to changing people. People don't change. We may feel that if I reason with that person and tell that person why that person is not behaving in a reasonable manner, it generally doesn't work, because that person can look at the situation very differently and argue back and give me a large number of reasons why I'm wrong, and in fact that person has an entirely different way of looking at things and that person is quite right. So the person can justify himself quite easily, and the result is that the person does not feel the necessity to change, and people generally don't change. That is a usual experience, and even in other situations it's not always possible to change. If the illness is incurable, it remains incurable. Or if I don't like the workplace, I may not find another job easily. Or if I don't have enough money, I'm ready to work hard to earn some more, but then where is that work available? So there can be difficulties in changing the situation. But one option that we always have is to change ourselves. So what it means is I should see things differently. This is something which has been discovered and rediscovered so many times that we have it available in different forms, in different languages. In Hindi we say, जब दृष्टि बदल जाती है तो सृष्टि बदल जाती है. When you look at things differently, the world itself changes. Or there's a beautiful couplet in Urdu, जब नज़र बदलती है तो नज़रिया बदल जाता है, जब नज़रिया बदलता है तो नज़ारे बदल जाते हैं. जब नज़र बदलती है, when you change the way you look at things, नज़रिया बदल जाता है, the attitude changes, the outlook changes. And when that changes, नज़ारे बदल जाते हैं, the scenery changes. What looked like a dreary desert turns into a green pasture, just because you are looking at it differently. Now, seeing things differently means seeing something positive in the situation. Now, for example, suppose a person is under stress because retirement is very close. The person feels that, after retirement, the position will go, the income will go down to half, I'll not have any work to do, I'll feel bored at home, and nobody will care for me because I don't have the position, I'm not earning that much. So he is fearing retirement. But then if somebody tells him that all that may be true, but then you'll have so much time on your hands and you can do all those things which you would have liked to do but kept postponing because of not having enough time. Now you can do all those things which you have been postponing so far. Now he has been given something positive to look at, something positive in this situation, and then he may start feeling that, it's not all negative. So he has found a positive, something positive, some reason for looking at the situation differently, and this sometimes somebody else can do because the person himself gets so accustomed to thinking about the situation in a particular way that that way of looking at the situation keeps reverberating in his mind, and he can't look at the situation differently at all. He gets stuck in that groove, and the more he gets stuck, the more he feels that that is the only way to look at it. Looking at the situation differently means seeing the divine in others, seeing the divine in a person whom one does not like. For example, if a woman feels that my life is miserable because of my mother-in-law. Now, the mother-in-law is also a manifestation of the divine. And if she doesn't like her, it's not a problem, it is a challenge. If she can see the divine in this person, she can see the divine in anybody else. And therefore, this person has actually given her an opportunity to see the divine in everybody else. And that is how uh, this person who was a problem turns into an opportunity. So she's a challenge so that she can see everybody, see the divine in everybody. So in Indian mythology, we think contrast Ram and Ravan. It's very easy to see the divine in Ram. It's difficult to see the divine in the villain in that epic, Ravan. It's difficult to see the divine in Ravan. But if you can see the divine in Ravan, you can see the divine in anybody. So it's good to have a Ravan in our life. Seeing the hand of the divine behind all events. And one of the events which people find it difficult to handle is marriage. Unhappy and unsuccessful marriages are far more common than happy and successful marriages. And when it comes to counselor, the single largest category of problems that they get is that which is related to marriage in one way or the other. And therefore, one might say that, well, that is one of the common sources of stress. But then the person can choose to be miserable because of that, or the person can choose to see that event also as something which gave the person an opportunity to look at life differently, look at life at a deeper level. Because if that person had not been there, the person would have become so dependent on the partner that his happiness would have been dependent on that partner. And I have seen people very happily married and all going well and looking forward to retirement. After retirement, we will have so much time together and we'll be very happy. And then lo and behold, a few years before the retirement or within a couple of years after retirement, one of the partners passes away. The other partner is shattered because happiness had become so dependent on the partner. I'm not saying that because of that we should not have a happy marriage. Even if we have a happy marriage, one should start thinking in terms of our happiness becoming dependent on something beyond that relationship. That is what is important. But for a person whose marriage is not successful and not happy, it is easier to discover a path which will make that person independent of the partner. So the person may continue to live through that marriage, but then the person lives also through that marriage much more happily, not only because now the person's happiness is independent of the type of partner he has, but this partner who looked like a curse now becomes a blessing. Because now the person feels that if this had not been my partner, how would I have discovered that path in life, that way of living, which makes my happiness independent of all external circumstances. Now, one of the things that emerges, in fact, from all the things that we have talked about, seeing something positive in the situation, seeing the divine in others, seeing the hand of the divine behind all events. Actually, the divine enters all these three. So in a way, we are surrendering to the divine. Seeing something positive in the situation, we can see it logically. For example, I talked about retirement. But then there are situations in which no matter how hard one tries, it is impossible to see anything positive at a rational level. For example, a person has an incurable illness like cancer at the age of 40. He is the only breadwinner in the family and he has 2 school-going children. How can you tell him that see something positive in the situation? There is nothing that he can see positive in that situation logically. However, from the spiritual point of view, still there is something positive. And let's see how that happens, and it does happen to at least some people to whom it comes naturally. In a few more, it can be induced through appropriate counseling. That is what the cancer surgeon Bernie Siegel discovered. And so anyway, how do these people start looking at it differently? Firstly, their attention is not focused on the disease. What they feel is that, well, I have this incurable illness, that is something I can't change, but at the same time, it is like an advance notice. I know well in advance that I'm not going to live very long. So let me try and do all those things which I was interested in doing but had been postponing so far. So build up a wish list of things that they would like to do before they uh, become too weak to do those things or leave this world. Secondly, not only their attention is not focused entirely on the illness, their attention is not focused even entirely on themselves. What that means is that they start looking at the world around them, and now they are more willing to help anybody around them because they feel now now not much of life is left. Let me use it as meaningfully as possible, helping as many people as possible. I still have something to give. Let me give what I have to those who need it. Not only that, they start reflecting on life and feel that there were many minor irritants which led to strained relationships, and they start mending those relationships. If they have hurt somebody, they start apologizing, and if somebody hurt them, they start forgiving that person. And those people, also knowing that this person now has an incurable illness, change their behavior towards this person. They become nice to him, and the result is that the person starts living in a far more pleasant and positive atmosphere, and the person himself contributes a lot to it. Further, what happens is that within the family and the caregivers, while there is stress because this person is the only breadwinner in the family, what happens in these situations is that the children start growing up much faster than they would in terms of getting more mature. And the result is that if this person does leave this world because of the illness, the family is not only more mature and prepared to take care of the situation, they also start turning more and more to that higher force during this period, and start getting influenced by the more positive behavior, the tendency of this patient in their family to be very easy. I mean, he's easily apologizing, he's easily forgiving, and he has become helpful. All this starts influencing the children and the other caregivers. The result is that he sort of lifts up the consciousness of the people around him through contagion, through contact, without preaching. And therefore, the few years that this person lives, during those few years he may grow spiritually more, address more of the purpose of life than he did in several decades of so-called normal life, and to quite an extent he achieves the same for his immediate family and other caregivers. So they've all changed through the experience, changed positively, and while they might suffer some physical hardship, some financial hardship, that is more than compensated by the fact that it was during this period, it was through this episode in one person's life in the family that they all ended up addressing the genuine purpose of life. They took far more steps in the right direction in life than they would have in several decades of normal, so-called normal life. So in other words, while we can see something positive in some situations logically, there are some situations where logic does not work. And that is where the spiritual worldview comes in handy, and we can always find something positive in the situation, no matter what. That doesn't mean that rationality is inconsistent with the spiritual worldview. Our capacity to reason has also been given to us by the divine, and therefore the spiritual way of looking at the situation positively includes the rational way of looking at the situation positively. But a counselor who is not restricted by looking at the situation only positively is able to give sometimes the client an insight which cannot come by looking at the situation positively, because now this counselor has a much larger highly expanded armamentarium. And the result is that this person can give that little nudge to the person who is a little receptive to it. And while going through a trauma like an incurable illness, people also become more receptive to this type of a nudge. And the result is that no matter what, the person can see the situation positively. And if the person himself does not have that type of a tendency, the counselor can facilitate that type of an insight. So in spirituality, there's no limitation in how we can see a situation positively. Seeing the divine in others, again, comes to the spiritual worldview, and seeing the hand of the divine behind all events, that is something which we are all familiar with. It's all God's will. That is something which comes in very handy, and once again is a part of just about every culture. We find it in every language. Thy will be done, Prabhu Ichha, Rab di Marzi, Inshallah. So many languages, but all saying essentially in a very popular short expression that it is God's will and therefore we have to reconcile with it. However, the surrender to the divine can be at three levels. First is surrender to the divine will. It's God's will and therefore we have to accept it. That makes God look like a dictator. He's all powerful and therefore we have no other choice. We have to accept whatever has happened. We can go a step further. We surrender not only to the divine will but also to divine wisdom. Because the divine is not only all powerful, the divine is also all wise. And therefore, if in its wisdom the divine has done something, there must be something good about it. If we can't see anything good about it, it is because of our own limitations. Because our intellect is limited. Maybe time will unfold. Sooner or later, we'll discover what was good about it. And that also does happen in life. If we look at something which gave us a great deal of stress 10 years ago, we very often find that we could not at that time foresee what good will emerge out of it. So that does happen. So that makes it easier to surrender because we have surrendered not only to the divine will but also to the divine wisdom. We can go still one step further. We surrender to the divine will and wisdom, but then we say that we may not know everything that is good about what has happened, but at least I know one thing that is good about it, that I also know. The rest maybe time will unfold. There's at least one thing good about it that I do know. And what is that? That is that all events and circumstances are an opportunity for spiritual growth. And therefore, there's at least one thing that I know. So there's at least one thing that I know which is positive. And that one thing which is positive in every situation is that every situation is an opportunity for spiritual growth, which is the true purpose of life. So that is how seeing things, we can see things differently no matter what the situation is. So some of the key features in stress management, or rather total eradication of stress, are changing yourself rather than the situation. Because the situation often can't be changed, but we can change so that we can look at the situation differently. Changing yourself means seeing something positive in the situation. And even when there's nothing positive in a situation, there's always one thing positive in it. And what is that? That is that everything is an opportunity for spiritual growth, or an OSG. That every situation is an opportunity for spiritual growth is a potent, infallible prescription for lasting mental peace. Infallible because it's so generalizable. There's nothing left out. And in fact, truly every situation is an opportunity for spiritual growth. Here we are talking about stressful situations, but even pleasant events are also an opportunity for spiritual growth. So we can grow through both so-called fortune and misfortune. So this is positive thinking unlimited, without any limitations. As Sri Aurobindo said in Savitri, there's a purpose in each stumble and fall. So the trick lies in seeing behind it and trying to see how we can use it. That is what Sri Krishna also tells Arjun, that this war is your opportunity. It's an opportunity for your spiritual growth. This is something that doesn't come in the life of every Kshatriya. Every warrior doesn't get that opportunity. Now, having seen things from a deeper level and understood it, now we'll turn a little more to the pragmatic side. Why? The reason being that sometimes, talking too much about stress in those lights, in that light, the type of light we have seen so far, and trying to tell the person that you can always look at the situation differently. There's always something positive in the situation, and so on. The person starts feeling that if I'm still under stress, it's all my fault. It's my fault that I can't look at things differently. Which means that stress itself leads to greater stress. It leads to greater stress because the person feels that I am under stress because there's something wrong with me. I cannot look at the situation the way I should be looking at it. And therefore, too much of talk about stress, which has become commonplace these days, itself leads to stress, and more so because the person is told that it is all your fault, as if. But the fact is that we are all human. We have our weaknesses and failings, and therefore, we may not be able to put into action all those things which we truly understand. We can always apply them to somebody else's problems. But when it comes to applying them to our own situation, it can be difficult for most of us. And therefore, you are not alone in this type of a predicament. And therefore, if you have a stressful situation that you are going through, certainly you will be able to go through it more easily if you can see through it. You can see through it in terms of that wider vision which we have talked about. But at the same time, there's no harm in turning to some measures which may not be that radical, but at the same time can provide quicker relief. And that is what we may call is the first aid in stressful situations. So what is the first aid in stress? We can start with the relaxation techniques. Any type of physical activity relaxes us to some extent. And that's why we find that very often when somebody is very angry, he says that I'm going out. And he takes a brisk walk and comes back. And he's much more relaxed. Because physical activity itself releases those feel-good hormones, endorphins from the brain. So physical activity makes us feel a little better. However, a modern counterpart of it is rather risky. Instead of going for a brisk walk, the person picks up the car and drives it rashly on the road. It may help the person get rid of a little stress, but then he creates stress for everybody else on the road while doing so. So that should not be done. However, going for a brisk walk or undertaking any type of physical activity is good. And yogic practices are also physical activity, and therefore they are useful. But they are even more useful than ordinary physical activity because of the atmosphere in which they are done, because they are done slowly, gently, peacefully, accompanied by a prayer, and so on. So all that makes those yogic practices even more relaxing than other types of physical activity. Then meditation, of course, is a well-accepted relaxation technique, and there's no harm turning to it as first aid, as well as use it for reinforcing within ourselves a deeper way of looking at the situation. Music. Playing music, if you can, singing, if you can, but at least listening to music can again be a very good way of relaxing. Staying moderately busy. If a person is idle, then there's more chance to ruminate on the problems, and that only makes us feel more stressful. And therefore, staying moderately busy does help. We say in Hindi, vyast raho, mast raho. Khali man shaitan ka ghar. So if you are idle, then you'll either be under stress or you'll be thinking of all types of mischief. So stay moderately busy, and that will all keep you happy. While I mean that is important because some people may have too much time and that is what is making them go into stress. The opposite is also happening very often these days. Some people are under stress because of being overworked. And that has again become an important issue, especially among young people, working people who have unrealistic targets to meet at the workplace. And they are more or less on duty 24 hours a day. Modern communication systems have made it possible to work from home, but it has also made it very real that the expectations sometimes are that the person is always available and is expected to respond to all types of WhatsApp messages and emails almost instantaneously, no matter what time of the day it is. So that type of work culture is also creating a great deal of stress. However, realizing this, employers are also sometimes now turning a little more flexible and are realizing the value of the balance between work and not being actively on duty. So that type of work-life balance, as it is called in the modern language, that is becoming more and more acceptable. Flexible hours, work-life balance, these are also becoming a reality among enlightened employers. But then there is a person who has taken it to another extreme. His name is Tim Ferriss. He has written a beautiful book called The 4-Hour Work Week. Just work for 4 hours a week. That may look ridiculous, but all the same, some of the principles that he has brought out are simple. And one of them is, he says, try to sort of work out an elimination sort of process. The way you try to eliminate foods one by one, the foods to which you might be allergic. So in the same way, eliminate from your life those activities which are not absolutely essential. And that can always be done. So eliminate things from your diet. And one of the interesting sort of amusing points that he makes is that one of the things he eliminated from his life was reading the newspaper. And he says that I haven't missed anything. If something really important happens, people around me are all talking about it. And then I don't know it, so I ask them, tell me a little more about it. And they're so happy. Happy on one hand to find that here is this ignorant fellow who doesn't know what is going on around. And then they get an opportunity to tell me something more which they enjoy. So that way I remain informed about all the really important things that are happening. I may be a little behind time, but that doesn't really matter. And I don't have to look at the newspaper. So all the time that I was spending on the newspaper is now being saved. So one can stay moderately busy as far as possible, but at the same time not be overworked. Help somebody. We should stay moderately busy, but then if some of that work that we do involves helping somebody, that will be more effective than other types of work. Because when we help somebody else, then firstly, it makes us aware of the fact that others also have problems, and that is why we are helping them. Secondly, we also realize that the problems that those other people had, whom we are helping, were much bigger than the problems we had. As I said that I was under stress because I didn't have a shoe till I discovered somebody who didn't have a foot. So helping somebody makes us conscious of other people's problems, which are far more serious than our own problems. And we start finding that maybe we are grumbling about nothing because we really have no problem, and that's where we are finding problems. So helping somebody actually ends up helping us. There's a Chinese saying that reminds me, which goes something like this: if you want to be happy for a day, get drunk. If you want to be happy for a month, get married. And if you want to be happy for life, then learn how to make others happy. You make others happy when you help them. If you do that, that's what keeps you happy for life. Then expressive therapies. Find a way of expressing yourself, be it through art, be it through music, or if nothing else, write a diary. just start writing down what you are going through. Not only that becomes cathartic, you find an outlet to ventilate yourself safely in secrecy. Nobody knows what you're writing in the diary. It's a personal document. But at the same time, you find that while doing that, you also discover solutions. You start getting suggestions for what to do in that type of a situation. So expressive therapies are again very helpful. The fire ritual. If you are angry with somebody, write a letter to that person. Write everything that you have in your mind. Give it a full expression. But then at the end of it, don't send that letter. Instead, confine it to a fire, saying that now I have forgiven this person. When you forgive that person, the person whom you do favor the most is yourself. Because staying angry is one of the ways in which you are handing over control to that other person. The person is no longer around you. The person did that years ago. And yet, just remembering that, you keep on thinking about that episode, those episodes, what all that person said, what all that person did. And while the person is not around you, you are giving that person the power to make you miserable through remote control. Why hand over that power to that person? So forgive that person completely and sincerely. And one of the ways to do it is to give it a physical expression. So writing everything that you had in mind first, and then consigning that paper to the fire with this resolution that now I have forgiven that person completely, in fact, ends up helping the person who forgives. It has been seen that people who stay completely alone are more under stress than who live with somebody. Even that somebody else is a pet, or for that matter, even a plant. If you take care of a pet or a plant, even that gives you at least an object on whom you can shower love, or a living being on whom you can shower your love. So keep a pet or a plant, especially if there's nobody else with whom you are living. Even if you are living with somebody and you have a pet or a plant to take care of, it does help, because these are objects on whom we can shower our love, but these are objects that don't quarrel with us. They have no egos, and therefore it helps a lot. And they are also full of unconditional love if we can perceive it. The plants grow much better as if the plant itself is smiling if you take good care of it. And the love of a pet, of course, is very obvious to all of us. And if none of these things works, there's no harm in talking to somebody. Who is that somebody? That somebody should have a few qualifications. One is that person should have the time to listen to you. Secondly, the person should be a patient listener. The person should be a patient listener. Not only he has the time, but then he shouldn't have the time to talk to you. The person should have the time to listen to you. That is more important, so that you feel lighter. And this person should be able to keep secrets. It's not that you have talked to that person and then tomorrow the world knows what you talked to that person. So the person should be able to keep secrets. The person should have some wisdom to give you a little better insight into what you are talking to him about. And this person should be neutral. Not only this person should be your friend and well-wisher, the person should not be biased in your favor so that the person just ends up confirming completely what you are talking about. You are criticizing somebody and this person also starts criticizing that person because this person is biased in your favor. This person should be preferably neutral. Only a neutral person can give you that impartial, unbiased insight into the issue, which cannot come from a person who is biased even in your favor. So talk to somebody who has all these qualifications. If you have one relative or friend who fulfills all these qualifications, you are extremely lucky. And if you don't have even one such person, there's nothing to worry because you have plenty of company. Most people don't have even one such person in their life these days who can fulfill all these qualifications. And that is why we need counselors. The counselors come into the picture, and there's no harm in turning to a counselor because sometimes, in some societies, there's a great deal of stigma attached to going to a counselor. People don't even understand the difference between a counselor or psychologist and a psychiatrist. A psychiatrist is primarily trained to deal with more serious issues where the person is not in touch with reality anymore, and that is what we call that the person has lost his mind, and that needs medication. So only a psychiatrist is qualified to prescribe medication. So that is a different story. It's not that anybody who goes to a counselor is mad or crazy. Uh, just about everybody, there's hardly anybody in the world who has never gone through a difficult phase of life. A difficult phase of life in which the person felt that on his or her own, the person could not cope with the situation, and the person needed a little help from somebody else. And that is essentially what counseling is about. One of the best ways of looking at counseling is a process in which one human being helps another human being go through a difficult phase of life with minimum pain and maximum growth. So what a good counselor does is just make this person going through a difficult phase of life go through that phase with minimum pain, which means as comfortably as possible, and at the same time with maximum growth, which means this should be the counselor should be able to give that insight which makes this person go through this phase while growing as a person, while achieving spiritual growth. Not only the person going through this stressful situation grows spiritually through this episode by this type of counseling, the counselor herself also grows through it. So it is a mutually uplifting relationship, something which we can call another type of a spiritual partnership. That is what counseling is about. And because it is difficult to find a person with whom you can share everything, and there is sometimes a stigma against counseling, and even if there's no stigma, it may cost quite a bit to have repeated sessions with a counselor. Places like the ashram come into the picture. They end up being informal support systems. Suppose there is an activity, and we have activities like that, like say the Sunday satsang. Every Sunday, 1.5 hours in the morning, anybody can come in and spend time in a peaceful atmosphere, listening to some devotional music and a spiritually uplifting talk. Now it happens that a few people turn up for those satsangs every week, almost every week. So these people not only listen to or what is going on, not only participate in the activity every week, they also end up seeing each other every week. And when they see each other every week, some of them who are more like-minded start talking to each other. And then they extend their stay in the ashram by also having lunch in the ashram. And they share still more while having lunch. And the result is that they find a counselor, an informal sort of a counselor, with whom they feel comfortable sharing all their joys and sorrows, and maybe also keep getting a little different insight into their issue without actually anybody feeling that this person has gone to a counselor. So they end up getting that counseling in an informal manner. And sometimes then they discover somebody there who can spend more time with them, who may be living in the ashram, and can give them a still more insight, because that person may be still more sort of geared towards giving this person a spiritual insight into the issue. So that's how these places again end up serving an important role in the society by informally turning into a support system where you get that type of informal counseling from like-minded people, the type of people who gravitate to the same place because at least they had something in common, which is something which may not happen within the family. And of course, the ultimate counselor is the divine, and that is what that opening devotional song was also about. ये मत कहो खुदा से मेरी मुश्किलें बड़ी हैं, मुश्किलों से कह दो मेरा खुदा बड़ा है. Don't tell God that my problems are enormous. Instead, tell the problems, my God is great. So turn to that counselor. When you go to bed, don't worry about your problems. Don't treat the pillow as a pillow. Treat it as the lap of the one who symbolizes the divine to you. Nothing will change overnight. Tomorrow, that ultimate answer will guide you. And you'll find that no matter what, you'll be able to well. And if you can sleep well, that can be considered a good indicator that you have to conquer stress. And for that, there is nothing better than that ultimate counselor who is also a mentor and a savior. As the mother has said, the best friend one can have, isn't he the divine, to whom one can say everything, reveal everything. You can be sure what you say to the divine will remain a secret, and therefore you can reveal everything. In fact, the divine already knows, but then you get the satisfaction, I have told the divine, and now that help will come. I am in touch with that higher force for whom everything is easy. And this is one counselor who is available to all, rich and poor alike, at any time of the day or night, without any appointment. Now let's have a look at a few questions. Stress can be relieved by the way we look at people, events, and circumstances. Yes, that is in fact the key to getting relief from stress. Stress can be relieved by yogic postures and meditation. That is too restrictive. Both would help to some extent, but to say that it can be relieved by those without any change in the way we look at people, events, and circumstances is expecting again too much from too little. It can be relieved by yogic postures because they include Shavasana. Yes, Shavasana is a relaxing posture, but that doesn't mean that that in itself will be enough. Yogic postures because they involve physical activity. Yes, any type of physical activity relieves stress. And yogic postures more than ordinary physical activity. But then if one has to choose the best alternative out of the four, it will still be the first one. One can get rid of stress without yogic postures, without meditation, provided one is able to look at people, events, and circumstances differently. But not purely through yogic postures, meditation, or physical activity if the person is not willing to change the outlook to life. So the best alternative is the first one. Of all the causes of stress listed by Patanjali, the root cause of stress is ignorance, ego, likes and dislikes, fear of death. Ignorance. Ignorance of the deeper truths of existence. That is what the reference is to here. And we have seen that if that has been removed, that is what we talked about in the spiritual worldview and the purpose of life. If that is understood, then all stress is taken care of. Because the others, in fact, follow from that ignorance. The ego, the sense of separation, the sense which makes us feel that my needs are more important than somebody else's needs, the feeling that my opinion is more correct than somebody else's opinion, all that comes from the ignorance of the oneness that unites us, which is far more real than the separation that we can see. So that is what the ego is about. Likes and dislikes. Now, liking and disliking people, liking and disliking events and circumstances, liking some objects of desire for which we develop a desire. Now, all these are rooted in the ego. So, from the ignorance follows ego, and from the ego follow the likes and dislikes of things that we like to have, events that we would like to experience, and people with whom we would like to be, and correspondingly, the events and people whom we dislike and therefore we would like to keep away from. Now, all these things are rooted in the ego. And that larger vision helps us overcome that. Fear of death, again rooted in the same ignorance, treating this life as the beginning and end of everything. Also, being attached to ourselves as a distinct individual. Once again, that is a type of expression of the ego. Sometimes we feel that, well, I'm not afraid of death, but I have so many responsibilities. I have so much to do in life. Now, that is only sort of trying to give good looking reasons for which are again based in the ego, and trying to sort of appear brave while the person is actually afraid of death. Now, let's look at responsibilities. As we talked about a person having cancer, he can be afraid of death, or he can overcome that fear and look at it differently. I also come across people who are afraid of death in the sense that they don't have an incurable disease, which means that one can have anxiety because of the fear of something which has not even happened yet. A person came and told me that my father died of heart disease, many other members of my family have died of heart disease, and I am only 40, I have 2 school-going children. Now I'm afraid that if I also get a heart disease and I die, then what will happen to them? I want to live for at least another 15 years. Now, nobody can give a guarantee that you can live for another 15 years, even if the person doesn't have a history of heart disease. That's first thing we have to understand. Because if that were so, I mean, if heart disease is the only thing of which a person can die, things would be so simple. Now, the way this person can look at it can be understood from a little story. The story goes like this. There's a person traveling by train, and he had some luggage with him, including a suitcase, a heavy suitcase, and he had picked it up and kept it on his head. So people started laughing, "Why are you keeping your suitcase on your head?" He said, "I thought the poor train is already carrying so much load. Let me help it a little bit." Now, when we say that these children are my responsibility, once again we are carrying that suitcase on our head. Whether we carry it on the head or we leave it on the seat or leave it under the seat, it is the same train that is carrying it. So when we say that these children are my responsibility, they are not my responsibility. The responsibility has been given to me. And therefore, it's the responsibility of the one who has given this responsibility to me. The responsibility is that of the divine who brought these children into this world. I was only an instrument for bringing them into this world, and this is a responsibility that has given to me. If the divine wants me to live, to take care of this responsibility for another 15 years, I'll be there for another 15 years. Why 15? I could be there around for the next 30 years if the divine wants me to carry this responsibility. But if not, then the divine has no shortage of instruments. Nothing will collapse, nothing will come to an end. And in fact, nothing really comes to an end. Children have grown up very well, even when they lost their parents early in life. So it's not that we don't have to carry the suitcase on our head. While the responsibility is there, we are the instruments of the divine. Let's do it to the best of our ability, because that's a privilege that has been given, that we have been entrusted with this responsibility. But at the same time, let's not be attached to that responsibility in such a way that we start fearing death. Another type of argument, but I have so many things to do. My project may appear very important to me. For example, I speak and I write, and I feel that I'm giving such beautiful talks and I write such beautiful books, and I have so many more to write. Now, what will happen if I die early? Nothing will happen. Many people have spoken much better than I do before I came into the world, and many will continue to speak after I'm dead and gone. And the world is full of millions of excellent books, much better than I write. So whether I die after writing 20 books or I die after writing 25 books will make absolutely no difference to the world. Excellent books have been produced in the past and they'll continue to getting produced. It makes no difference to the world. Then why do I speak and write? Because while I am there, this is what I feel that I have been given, and therefore those who seem to need it, I can go on giving it to them till I can. But at the same time, that is fulfilling the purpose of my life. So it basically, once again, it boils down to a self-centered pursuit. That is what spirituality is. So I'm fulfilling the purpose of my life by doing what I am doing, but to the world, whether I'm there or not, it makes no difference. It is up to the divine who has entrusted me with this responsibility now by making me feel that this is what I should be doing, and therefore I'm doing it. And when the divine feels that this instrument is now worn out and it needs to be replaced, the way factory manager decides this model has now grown too old, let me get rid of this machine, get another one in its place. So it is up to the divine, and all it takes is one little clot which will travel somewhere from my leg or somewhere and get into the lungs or the brain and collapsed. Enough. You have spoken enough, you have written enough. Another new instruments are ready to take over. So that's what will happen. So I have to be prepared for that. So fear of death arises once again from that same ignorance, and from which issues the ego, which makes the person, it's my responsibility, it is my project. How will it continue if I go? Everything will continue, the world will not come to an end. Okay, so that's how one can see that all these sources of stress which Patanjali lists, avidya, asmita, ragadvesh, abhinivesha, klesha. Avidya, ignorance; asmita, ego; ragadvesha, likes and dislikes; abhinivesha, fear of death. These are root causes of stress according to Patanjali, and they're all rooted basically in ignorance, which means the spiritual worldview, not only understood but also applied in life. There's a big gap between knowing and being able to use it in life, but all the same, it is the ultimate solution to all stress. So the root cause of stress according to Patanjali is ignorance. The rest follow from it. Acute stress may be relieved to some extent, not only to some extent, by meditation, yes. By jogging, it's a physical activity, yes. By helping somebody, yes. All of the above. So all of the above is the right answer. But none of these by itself will be a total solution, will not eradicate stress. To some extent, yes, stress may be relieved by all of the above. Okay. Again, these two are inexhaustible sources for living a life that is full of love, peace and joy, and for eradicating stress, The Life Divine and Savitri, the two books which may be considered Upanishads in the English language. And in this book, Understanding Spirituality, this forms chapter 3, which is again a pretty long chapter, about 50 pages. And in this one again, there is a pretty long chapter on stress titled Don't Worry, Be Happy. Back to Health Through Yoga. And in Veda of the Body by Dr. Alok Pandey, another excellent collection of a few chapters. And of course, quite a bit is scattered throughout the book, but specially concentrated matter on stress management from pages 199 through 224, about 25 pages on stress management. And in this book, Spiritual Wisdom in Small Doses, you'll find short 1 to 2 page essays on just about everything related to stress, like positive thinking, psychology, stress management, etc. Gratitude to the Mother and Sri Aurobindo for making it all possible. And thank you all for listening.
Namaste, Bhaiya. I have a comment and then I have a question for Aditi. First of all, it was a great revision, the last couple of sessions. I remember when I did the yoga course in 2018, and especially the sessions on spiritual worldview, the purpose of life, and finally the stress management, we experienced a sense of contagion there in the collective. And ever since, we experienced it over and over again because we were operating in that spirit. And so thank you for that. My question is to Aditi. Aditi, you lay a lot of emphasis on inner experience and purity of aspiration. And in your role as a counselor, you sincerely try to offer that. And, you talk about experiencing in silence and, expression and freedom. And what Bhaiya talked about, the attributes of a good counselor. Would you want to share your views on that in your own experience in the last many years? Thank you.
Exactly what you're saying. It's all about holding the space and letting the other person see what they're sharing. So it's all about refining and fine-tuning their questioning. So when they come in, they have a certain question and they're all focused on what the other person is doing or what is wrong with the world or the situation, slowly trying to turn in and see what is your role in the situation. So in any interaction, there are three things involved: people, situation, and you. So it's an interchange and an interaction between these three things. So just placing everything at the right spectrum for them and just letting them watch it in silence, it helps a lot to kind of sort things to begin with. So that is how I look at it. Would you like to answer?
No, I think that's good. Any other questions? Does anybody else have? Any questions in the chat box?
How to manage stress due to deadlines? Can we really avoid it?
Yes, how to avoid stress due to deadlines. That is one of the categories of stress that is becoming very common in the corporate sector. By having a deadline which is difficult to meet, by having a target which is difficult to meet, it's considered that you are challenging the person and therefore the person will do his best. I think once again a little more enlightened view among the employers is what is important, in the sense that while I mean it is important to have a little bit of challenge, but challenge beyond a certain point becomes frustrating. That applies to stress in general. It follows that inverted U-shaped curve, in that at a certain level of stress you are at your optimum performance. If one is too relaxed, then again the performance falls. If there's too much stress, then again the performance declines. So one doesn't have to take that stress beyond a certain point. And if the employer doesn't understand, the employee has to make it understood. So which means that one should not be afraid of making that understood, that this is an unrealistic deadline. And also employers have to understand, and otherwise the employees have to make them understood, make them understand that if the person is a little more relaxed, seems to have a little less work than the person can actually do, that time apparently for doing nothing is the time when all types of innovative ideas come. That is the time you are at your most creative. And if your head is always cluttered with concrete things, the immediately to be done and within this much time to be done, and so much to be done, if the one is preoccupied with all those very concrete material measurable details, then there's no room left for the mind to ruminate, which is necessary for being creative and innovative. And eventually what makes companies progress is not just meeting the targets and deadlines, but what brings about phenomenal growth is a few creative and innovative ideas which should keep coming from time to time. It is those ideas also need to keep coming continuously and have a fast turnover.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks. Good morning, Dr. Ramesh.
Good morning.
So we have a lot of issues coming with the siblings. I mean, the siblings want the other siblings to solve their problem. Usually it doesn't work because another sibling is not the right person to counsel. So how do we make them go to a counselor? Because I face with this problem. I have two sisters who have some issues, but they refuse to go to a counselor.
Yes, that's a good question. I mean, in case of grown-up persons like you,
can I just stop you for a minute? One is that the first topic you said about this mother-in-law, daughter-in-law issue in the house. The other one is feeling a little depressed because they don't have issues. They don't have kids and they feel very lonely. They expect our children to go and visit them, but the younger kids no more. They don't do. They have their own life.
Yes, in case of grown-up persons like you, siblings can be good counselors to each other. In some cases, they may prove inadequate because of being biased. They are not neutral. So, say, I mean, if there is a mother-in-law, daughter-in-law issue, then naturally you can't be totally neutral. You will look at it more from your sister's point of view. So you are not totally neutral. That is what comes in the way. The second thing, not having an issue, to that, I mean, the spiritual solution is again sort of going beyond this necessity for a biological child. The spiritual solution would be adoption. That
Yeah, it has its own limitation. They should adoption, I think, needs them to be a little more younger. The parents.
one can adopt a little older child if the parents are not very young. One can adopt a little older child. Of course, the younger the better when one adopts. But even older children can be adopted, and they are helpful both for it's a sort of at least gives the adopted child a much better life, and for the parents again somebody on whom they can shower their love and affection and see the child grow and bloom. So adoption would be the solution. And because you are adopting a little older child, that head start is already there. The child will be quite grown up by the time the couple is old.
Thank you, sir.
The end of the session today, and thank you everyone.